Section 1. Europe and the Faith. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Europe and the Faith by Hilaire Belloc. Section 1. Introduction. The Catholic Conscience of History. I say the Catholic conscience of history. I say the conscience, that is, an intimate knowledge through identity, the intuition of a thing, which is one with the knowledge. I do not say the Catholic aspect of history. This talk of aspects is modern and therefore part of a decline. It is false and therefore ephemeral. I will not stoop to it. I will rather do homage to truth and say that there is no such thing as a Catholic aspect of European history. There is a Protestant aspect, a Jewish aspect, a Mohammedan aspect, a Japanese aspect, and so forth. For all of these look on Europe from without. The Catholic sees Europe from within. There is no more a Catholic aspect of European history than there is a man's aspect of himself. Sophistry does indeed pretend that there is even a man's aspect of himself. In nothing does false philosophy prove itself more false. For a man's way of perceiving himself, when he does so honestly and after a cleansing examination of his mind, is in line with his Creator's, and therefore with reality. He sees from within. Let me pursue this metaphor. Man has in him conscience, which is the voice of God. Not only does he know by this that the outer world is real, but also that his own personality is real. When a man, though flattered by the voice of another man, yet says within himself, "I am a mean fellow," he has a hold of reality. When a man, though maligned of the world, says to himself of himself, "My purpose was just," he has a hold of reality. He knows himself, for he is himself. A man does not know an infinite amount about himself, but the finite amount he does know is all in the map. It is all part of what is really there. What he does not know about himself would, did he know it, fit in with what he does know about himself. There are indeed aspects of a man for all others except these two, himself and God who made him. These two, when they regard him, see him as he is. All other minds have their several views of him, and these indeed are aspects, each of which is false, while all differ. But a man's view of himself is not an aspect, it is a comprehension. Now then, so it is with us who are of the faith and the great story of Europe. A Catholic, as he reads that story, does not grope at it from without. He understands it from within. He cannot understand it altogether because he is a finite being, but he is also that which has to understand. The faith is Europe, and Europe is the faith. The Catholic brings to history, when I say history in these pages, I mean the history of Christendom, self-knowledge. As a man in the confessional accuses himself of what he knows to be true and what other people cannot judge, so a Catholic, talking of the united European civilization, when he blames it for motives and for acts which are his own. He himself could have done those things in person. He is not relatively right in his blame, he is absolutely right. As a man can testify to his own motive, so can the Catholic testify to unjust, irrelevant, or ignorant conceptions of the European story. For he knows why and how it proceeded. Others, not Catholic, look upon the story of Europe externally as strangers. They have to deal with something which presents itself to them partially and disconnectedly by its phenomena alone. He sees it all from its centre, in its essence, and together. I say again, renewing the terms, the Church is Europe, and Europe is the Church. The Catholic conscience of history is not a conscience which begins with the development of the Church in the basin of the Mediterranean. It goes back much further than that. The Catholic understands the soil in which that plant of faith arose, in a way that no other man can. He understands the Roman military effort, why that effort clashed with the gross Asiatic and merchant empire of Carthage, what we delivered from the light of Athens, what food we found in the Irish and the British, the Gallic tribes, their dim but awful memories of immortality, what cousinship we claim with the ritual of false but profound religions, and even how the ancient Israel, the little violent people before they got poisoned, while they were yet national in the mountains of Judah, was in the old dispensation at least central, as we Catholics say, sacred, devoted to a peculiar mission. For the Catholic the whole perspective falls into its proper order. The picture is normal. Nothing is distorted to him. The procession of our great story is easy, natural, and full. It is also final. But the modern Catholic, especially if he is confined to the use of English tongue, suffers from a deplorable, and it is to be hoped, a passing accident. No modern book in the English tongue gives him a conspectus of the past. He is compelled to study violently hostile authorities, North German or English copying North German, whose knowledge is never that of the true and balanced European. He comes perpetually across phrases which he sees at once to be absurd, either in their limitations or in the contradictions they connote. But unless he has the leisure for an extended study, he cannot put his finger upon the precise mark of the absurdity. In the books he reads, if they are in the English language at least, he finds things lacking which his instinct for Europe tells him should be there, but he cannot supply their place because the man who wrote those books was himself ignorant of such things, or rather could not conceive them. I will take two examples to show what I mean. The one is the present battlefield of Europe, a large affair not yet cleared, concerning all nations and concerning them apparently upon matters quite indifferent to the faith. It is a thing which any stranger might analyze, one would think, and which yet no historian explains. The second I deliberately choose as an example, particularly and narrow, and especially doctrinal story. I mean the story of St. Thomas of Canterbury, of which the modern historian makes nothing but an incomprehensible contradiction, but which is to a Catholic a sharp revelation of the halfway house between the Empire and modern nationalities. As to the first of these two examples, here is at last the great war in Europe, clearly an issue. Things come to a head. How came it? Why these two camps? What was this curious grouping of the West holding out in desperate alliance against the hordes that Prussia drove to victory, apparently inevitable after the breakdown of the Orthodox Russian shell? Where lay the roots of so singular a contempt for our old order, chivalry, and morals as Berlin then displayed? Who shall explain the position of the papacy, the question of Ireland, the aloofness of old Spain? It is all a welter if we try to order it by modern external, especially by any materialist or even skeptical, analysis. It was not climate against climate, that facile materialist contrast of environment, which is the crudest and stupidest explanation of human affairs. It was not race, if indeed any races can still be distinguished in European blood, save broad and confused appearances, such as Easterner and Westerner, short and tall, dark and fair. It was not, as another foolish academic theory, popular some years ago, would pretend, an economic affair. There was here no revolt of rich against poor, no pressure of undeveloped barbarians against developed lands, no plan of exploitation, nor of men organized, attempting to seize the soil of less fruitful owners. How came these two opponents into being, the potential antagonism of which was so strong that millions willingly suffered their utmost for the sake of a decision? That man who would explain the tremendous judgment on the superficial test of religious differences among modern sects must be bewildered indeed. I have seen the attempt made in more than one journal and book, enemy and allied. The results are lamentable. Prussia, indeed the protagonist, was atheist, but her subject provinces supported her exultantly. Catholic Cologne and the Rhine and tamely Catholic Bavaria. Her main support, without which she could not have challenged Europe, was that very power whose sole reason for being was Catholicism, the House of Habsburg-Lorraine, which from Vienna controlled and consolidated the Catholic against the Orthodox Slav. The House of Habsburg-Lorraine was the champion of Catholic organization in Eastern Europe. The Catholic Irish largely stood apart. Spain, not devout at all, but hating things not Catholic because those things are foreign, was more than apart. Britain had long forgotten the unity of Europe. France, a protagonist, was notoriously divided within herself over the religious principle of that unity. No modern religious analysis, such as men draw up who think of religion as opinion, will make anything of all this. Then why was there a fight? People who talk of democracy as the issue of the Great War may be neglected. Democracy, one noble, ideal, but rare and perilous form of human government, was not at stake. No historian can talk thus. The essentially aristocratic policy of England now turned to a plutocracy, the despotism of Russia and Prussia, the immense complex of all other great modern states, gives such nonsense the lie. People who talk of a struggle for supremacy between the two Teutonic champions, Germany and England, are less respectable still. England is not Teutonic and was not protagonist. The English cabinet decided by but the smallest possible majority, a majority of one, to enter the war. The Prussian government never dreamt it would have to meet England at all. There is no question of so single an issue. The world was at war. Why? No man is an historian who cannot answer from the past. All who can answer from the past, and are historians, see that it is the historical depth of the European faith, not its present surface, which explains all. The struggle was against Prussia. Why did Prussia arise? Because the imperfect Byzantine evangelization of the eastern Slavonic plains just failed to meet, there in Prussia, the western flood of living tradition welling up from Rome. Prussia was in hiatus. In that small, neglected area, neither half civilized from the Byzantine East nor fully from the Roman West, rose a strong garden of weeds, and weeds sow themselves. Prussia, that is, this patch of weeds, could not extend until the West weakened through schism. It had to wait till the battle of the Reformation died down. But it waited, and at last, when there was opportunity, it grew prodigiously. The weed patch overran first Poland and the Germanies, then half Europe. When it challenged all civilization, at last it was master of 150 million souls. The end of section 1.